Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video, and today we're going to be looking at the 2022 midterm elections, and an overview of these elections, not the Senate or the House or the governors specifically, but all of these into one maybe 20-minute long video. So we're not going to spend as much time analyzing each individual race as we are analyzing each kind of chamber, I guess you could say. So we're talking about the Senate first, then we're going to go to the governors, then we're going to talk a little bit about the House, but with redistricting happening, it's going to be harder to make a prediction, but we're going to talk a little bit about it. We're also going to be factoring Joe Biden's approval rating and some generic ballot polls. This is going to be a pretty cool video, and I'm actually, between me and my viewers, I'm actually really hyped with this video because it brings me back to what we were doing, in October, September 2020, which I think was really awesome because we, looked at a ton of polls. We haven't been able to do that because there've been such, very little poll against, polls that haven't been great in the past. So right now, I'm actually really excited for this video. But before we get started, I'm going to say something. So this is a disclaimer, and I'm going to be talking about COVID during this video. So if you don't want to hear about that, I get it's a really, COVID sucks. We've been in this for 18 months almost, and I'm sick of it. I know you're sick of it. So if you don't want to hear about that, you are more than welcome to click away from this video. I completely understand. But this can be coming up a lot in this video. So, yeah. Now, I take COVID very seriously. I wore a mask for over a year, from when they first said to wear a mask in May or June of 2020. I went to in-person school 3 days a week from November 2020 all the way to June 2021, and I wore a mask each and every one of those days. And I played sports. For those of you who know me, who's listened to my Q&As, I think I've mentioned I play basketball, and I run around a basketball court wearing a mask, and sometimes I wear glasses when I play basketball because I wear glasses. And when you have a mask that goes over your nose and you're wearing glasses, your eyes get fogged up and it's very hard to see. So, me more than anyone, people who wear glasses understand that wearing a mask, not the most fun endeavor. And I understand there are people who don't have glasses who don't like wearing masks because it's uncomfortable or because it gets hot after a while because they forgot to brush their teeth that morning and it smells bad. I have been there before, and that is why I now brush my teeth for 5 minutes every morning. And I get that wearing masks, not ideal. But I think the only way, and I'm going to say this, by the way, the only way that we can beat this pandemic and quit the masks is by getting vaccinated. So, I think I mentioned this earlier, maybe I didn't, this is my third take of this video, but I got vaccinated the first chance I had. I got my first dose in May of 2021, I think, and then I got my second dose in early June. So, I was vaccinated, but fully vaccinated even before the school year ended. And I highly encourage everyone to get vaccinated. I saw some of my friends on Twitter got vaccinated the other day. And I really appreciate that everyone gets vaccinated. Tag me. I've had people ask me questions about the vaccine. Not a scientist. I generally like to refer people to people that I trust on the issue. But I will tell you that the vaccines are very safe and effective. And I highly encourage everyone to get, whether it be Pfizer, Moderna, J&J, whatever vaccine. They're all very effective. They're all very good vaccines. They're all safe and secure, and it's not a partisan issue. The vaccines were developed, and a lot of them were bought under the Trump administration. They were, I guess, delivered by the Biden administration, and they bought some more vaccines. So, Donald Trump got a vaccine, Joe Biden got a vaccine, Republicans in Congress have gotten vaccines, Democrats in Congress have gotten vaccines. So it's not a political thing, and I highly encourage everyone to get vaccinated. In fact, I think I said this in another video. If you are hesitant about getting the vaccine and you get the vaccine, tag me on Twitter, email me, mention me on Instagram or whatever, and I'll do whatever video you want, because that's how badly I want everyone to get vaccinated, I'm still in school. Unfortunately, I am not an adult, but I'm still in school, and I would really like this to be over, because distance learning, I was okay with it, but not the most fun thing ever, right? So, I highly encourage everyone to get vaccinated, and I do think that vaccines are really the only way we're going to get out of this pandemic. So, please get vaccinated. Thank you. Now, again, I'm going to start filling out the states that I don't really want to talk about throughout this video in both the Senate and the gubernatorial races, but what I think we should be remembering is that when Joe Biden was, I think most of us can agree that Joe Biden only won the 2020 election because of COVID. I think without COVID, he would have narrowly lost. I think it would have been, and I made this comparison to a friend, and I'm pretty proud of it. I think Joe Biden would have lost kind of like John Kerry lost in 2004, running against an unpopular incumbent, but the undecideds really had no reason to vote for him, right? Kerry in 2004, he lost because undecided voters had really no reason to vote for him, and they just stuck with Bush because the economy was doing okay, really. Because incumbent presidents only generally lose if the economy is tanking, or if there's, in Trump's case, a pandemic or some major crisis. So that is kind of what's going on. I think right now, where Joe Biden was elected, and I think that voters elected him because of COVID, and by admitting that, the voters had to say that he had one job. He had to kind of get America back on track, get America normal again, and kind of fix COVID. And originally people said, okay, well, I think it'll back in March 2020, we'll be back in school in 2 weeks. And we'll be completely normal by the end of this summer. We'll be completely normal by New Year 2021. We'll be completely normal by June of 2021. And here we are. I'm filming this video in August, I think 2nd, and I'll be releasing it on August 4th. So here we are, and we're still not normal. We're still being told to wear a mask, even if we're vaccinated, and we're still being told to social distance and follow coronavirus guidelines. And again, I don't like wearing a mask, but if I need to do it, I will, and I highly encourage everyone to do it if they need to. Now, that being said, I do think the CDC has had pretty bad messaging, and it's unfortunate because they have lost a lot of the trust that they once enjoyed with the public, because they've been kind of flip-flopping on some issues. In May they said, oh, if you're vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask, and then it became, you should wear a mask inside. And now it's becoming, maybe you have to wear a mask in a lot of counties and a lot of states. So it's really unfortunate that people have lost their trust in the CDC. And to be fair, I'm not saying that I don't understand why, because there's been a lot of flip-flopping on the issue, and I do think that the CDC could have done a much, much better job of communicating what needs to happen in order for us to get out of this pandemic. And I do think, for the record, I'm not a scientist. I'm not as smart as, the vast majority of people who are talking about COVID, but I do think that in order to restore trust in the vaccine, I think we have to do a better job of talking about it and saying how it's effective. And, I think the media has a role to play in this as well. I saw on Twitter, CNBC tweeted, there have been 125,000 breakthrough cases of COVID with people who are vaccinated. Okay, in those cases where they make up 0.08% of the total people who are vaccinated, right? So less than 0.1% of people who are vaccinated got COVID. And when they got it, the vast majority of them were asymptomatic. I think 8 people were hospitalized. So get vaccinated, there's a very, very low chance you'll get hospitalized. And I think they were all already high-risk adults. So I'm not downplaying COVID, but I am saying that we need to get vaccinated, and that I just wish the media and the CDC would do a better job of talking about it, because it's important. And I think, like I said it many times in this video, the only way that we get out of this pandemic is by getting vaccinated. So how is this tied to the 2022 midterms? Well, like I said earlier, the Democratic Party had one job in the American voters' eyes, and that was to fix COVID, get America back on track as soon as possible. And I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately. And I know I don't like to say it. I know most of you don't want to hear it, but we're going to be wearing masks, I think, for at the very least until January 2022. It's annoying, but I think we'd be lucky to get them off by New Year. So that is not good for the Democratic Party, because by January 2022, there'll only be 11 months till the midterms. And I know that sounds like a long time, but we were 11 months away from the 2021 Virginia governor's race in January of this year, and we're basically almost there now, and we have a really competitive race there. And I think that these races are narrowing up because of COVID. In April, I think that Virginia or California, those races were pretty safe for the Democratic Party, but now they're becoming more competitive, and the Democrats are having to pour money into these races, despite the fact that these are states that voted for Joe Biden by double digits, each of them. So, to mention these two states, I think both of them are likely for the Democratic Party, but I think Virginia could easily fall to below 5%. Terry McAuliffe, I think he's going to win by about 6 or 7. Glenn Youngkin, his campaign is okay, but he kind of shot himself in the foot with the calling Asian people, I wouldn't say a slur, but like a racist term. He called them yellow in an interview. He has kind of been tied by Terry McAuliffe to Trump, and he stands on abortion, and Virginia is a very pro-choice state, so he's being hurt by the R next to his name, and I think that if he loses, which he's still favored to lose, he's got a chance, I think he's still favored to lose, it'll be because of the R next to his name. Now, California, the Democratic Party is kind of, I wouldn't say they're panicking about this race because they're still definitely favored to win it, but this Gavin Newsom is sweating, and that is something that should not be happening. 3 months ago I would have said, the Democrats are going to waste, like if the Democrats pour in a cent into this race, they are wasting their time. But now it's important for them to, run ads, tie the Republican Party, whether it be Kevin Faulconer, Caitlyn Jenner, John Cox, or Larry Elder, to Donald Trump, because Donald Trump did lose California. As someone who's from California, not very popular here. And I know California is a big state, so what's happening in the Bay Area is not happening in Modoc County, or what's happening in Los Angeles is not happening in San Bernardino or San Diego or Monterey Bay. But it's still important that we remember that California is a blue state, and I think that I'm not going to take people very seriously if they think the Republicans are somehow favored in this race, because they can win it, but I do not think that realistically they're favored. And the only reason that it's narrowing up is because the Democratic Party is absolutely shooting themselves in the foot with COVID. I think that what they should have done, and I hate to make this political, but I think that if the Democrats wanted to realistically do better in the midterms, what they should have done was say, create an incentive for people to get vaccinated, because like I said, that's the only way to get out of this pandemic, and say, if you're vaccinated, you can take off the mask, and make it, once you're vaccinated, you're free to do whatever you want, and then make it become, why you're not vaccinated, do you want to take off that mask, right, that kind of thing, and that would be much, much better for them, politically speaking. And I think, you get more people to get vaccinated, so I think that's a win for America as well. And I'm only saying this because the Democrats are in power. If the GOP was in power, it would be the same thing. But, the Democrats have to be in power right now, and I think that what's good for them what's good for America is good for them, because they'll get more votes. So, yeah. Now, California, just before I move on, because I want to talk about more races, I think it's likely Democrat for now. I think Newsom's going to win by 12 to 15% in the recall, but this race should not be this close. The fact that, I live in California, I live in the Bay Area, and, obviously my area is going to vote to not recall Newsom, and most people I know do not support the recall. But the fact that on TV, like when I turn on the news, I see, do not recall Gavin Newsom. Like, the other day, I was eating out, and I saw, and my friend told me he noticed an ad, and it was Elizabeth Warren speaking and tying it's all about stopping the Republican recall, and the Democrats are tying the Republicans in this race to the Republican Party, because in case you didn't know already, the GOP is not very popular in California, so that's what they have to keep doing. I think Gavin Newsom's going to win, but it should not be this close, and I think the bellwether counties like Butte County or Orange County, the more competitive counties, we're going to see where they stand on COVID, and I think it's going to be a rude awakening for Democrats, because this race is on September 14th. It's in only a month from now, and it's going to be really interesting to see where these counties that are more close to the national environment vote. Now, going back to the Senate, I think right now the Democrats are in a really tough position in the Senate. So I think they're going to win Nevada and Arizona. I think Nevada could actually be pretty close, because COVID restrictions really hurt them in Clark County, but I think they're still going to win because Adam Laxalt's not a very good candidate, and because Kathleen Cortez Masto is quite popular. I don't think she's going to lose. But I do think that they're not doing well in Wisconsin. I think Sarah Goodluski or Mandela Barnes, they're both pretty good candidates. They're both pretty close. I think Goodluski's a little better than Barnes because she has one statewide of her own. That's an unpopular opinion. I get most Democrats think Barnes is better electability-wise, but I think it's Goodluski because she's one statewide on her own, and because she's from kind of, Eau Claire is the more center part of the state. It's kind of up here, right? And Milwaukee is kind of, it's a working class city for sure, but it's, kind of more tied to the Democratic establishment than an area like Eau Claire is, because I do think that Eau Claire is in the working class Wisconsin's 3rd district. It's certainly closer to it than Milwaukee is, so. Yeah, and I think that the Republicans are going to hold Florida Senate. I don't know why I didn't label that earlier. North Carolina, Sherry Beasley is a good candidate for Democrats, but she's not good enough to flip the seat. She's good, but she's not great, and I think the Democrats need a great candidate to flip this seat. New Hampshire, I think if Sununu runs, he should win, although I'm not sure if he's going to run. I think Alaska's going to be likely for the Republicans. That puts us GOP at 50 seats, and the Democrats have to win these 2 seats to have what they have in the Senate right now. So in Georgia, I do think the race is still lean Democrat. Herschel Walker is not as great of a candidate as we thought he was a couple months ago. He had domestic abuse allegations. He reportedly told his wife that he held a gun to her head and said, "I'm going to blow your brains out," which is something you do not want in a Senate race. So he is not, I think, the GOP's ideal candidate. They have much better candidates like Dave Black or something like that. And Doug Collins, I know he's not going to run, but I think he would potentially win this seat. Now, Pennsylvania, I think, is the closest one right now. A month ago, I would have said it was Wisconsin, but like I said, the Democrats are really hurting themselves with COVID. They're really shooting themselves in the foot. And as of right now, this is not my prediction for the midterms, but as of right now, if the midterms were held today or tomorrow or in a week, I think this is what would happen. I think the Republicans right now would win Pennsylvania. It's very close. I would not be surprised at all if the Democrats won Pennsylvania, and they could very well, retake it if they clean up their act in a couple months. But I think right now the Democrats are a mess. I think that they are really messing this up, and they had one job and they're failing to complete that job. This is kind of what the Democrats have done in the past. They've won power, they've been swept into power, historically in 2008, they won a historic election. 2020 was a crazy election, they won it. And then they, maybe passed one big bill, Obamacare, COVID relief checks, and they're going to pass an infrastructure bill. But they have not been able to kind of fulfill their promises. And I'm not saying the Democrats lied to the American people. Trump said he was going to, do a lot of stuff he didn't do. But I am saying that the Democrats have done this in the past. They've won power and then lost power because they didn't, do something that the American people wanted them to do. And when in Pennsylvania, when John Fetterman, for example, gets the nomination and he runs and says, "I'm a progressive who's going to make change," people are going to say, your party is in power right now. Why aren't you making change? Why aren't we still wearing masks 3 years later, right? So this is not something that the Democrats are going to be able to campaign on because in 2020 this was their winning issue. This was how they won the election, how they won control of the Senate. Now it's turned against them, and if they talk about COVID, people are going to say, "You've been in power for longer than Donald Trump has, or for longer than Donald Trump was with COVID, and you still haven't fixed it. We're going to vote Republican." And undecideds are going to vote Republican, and that's going to hurt the Democratic Party, obviously. So Pennsylvania, I think, right now, tilt Republican, but that could change. The Democrats, like I said, could clean up their act, but that's what I think is going to happen right now in the Senate. So 51-49 in favor of the GOP in the Senate. This is the first time in Joe Biden's presidency that I've had the Republican Party taking over the Senate, and it's really interesting. So in the governor's elections, I think Nevada's really close. Like I said, Steve Sisolak not as popular as Kathleen Cortez Masto, but right now the Republicans' leading candidate is John Lee. Marco Modi, I think, could have potentially ran, but unfortunately he was diagnosed with cancer, which is really unfortunate. I tweeted, I said, praying for a speedy recovery. No matter what you think, it's important that we, pray for people, even if we disagree with them politically. So I'm hoping that Marco Modi gets better soon, but if he still has cancer in a year from now, I don't think that he'd run for governor. I think he'd just try to win his more safe House seat instead of running a really high-stakes gubernatorial campaign against Steve Sisolak. So I think right now Sisolak, because he's the incumbent, will be favored, but COVID is really hurting him. Now, in Arizona, this is another state where COVID is going to hurt the Democrats, but I think Kelly's a strong enough incumbent to hold. Kimberly Yee, I think, is going to win this race because, suburban voters in Maricopa County don't want, more strict COVID restrictions. Arizona, Maricopa County was a hotspot for a very long time, especially in the summer of 2020, where they had a lot of COVID cases. They're up there with Florida for how many COVID cases they had, which was, obviously not great, but the restrictions were pretty loose, and I think that, the majority of voters in Arizona like that. So I think Kimberly Yee, good enough candidate to win this race, and I think she's going to win by 3 or 4% as of right now. Katie Hobbs could win this race, but right now I don't think she's favored. In Kansas, I think Laura Kelly's done, and her as a incumbent who's not, she's popular. She's not unpopular, but she's not as popular as someone like John Bell Edwards or Andy Beshear or Phil Scott, who win in deep red or blue states against the opposite party. So I think Kelly's going to lose by 6 or 7% right now, which would be, an embarrassing performance for sure, but she's definitely going to run ahead of every Democrat statewide because she is the incumbent governor. Wisconsin, I think Wisconsin's going to be tilt Republican. Tony Evers, I think, originally was in a better spot because of the vaccine rollout, but unfortunately for him, the vaccines are slowing down. They're speeding up again, which I'm optimistic about. Like when you look at the graph, they kind of slowed down for the first 3 weeks of July, and I think since Delta's kind of scaring some people are getting vaccinated, so it's speeding up a little bit again, which I hope continues, but unfortunate for the Democratic Party, that's hurting them. Michigan, James Craig is a really good candidate, and he officially announced, I think, 2 weeks ago, so Gretchen Whitmer is going to have a tough race there, but I think she's favored to win. Georgia, Stacey Abrams, I think, are going to have a tough race there, but I think she'd probably beat Brian Kemp because he is not well liked by the Trump base, and I do not think that he has enough appeal to suburban voters to overcome that. Florida, Ron DeSantis, pretty popular governor. They're going to win by 5 or 6%. Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro is, I think, a pretty good candidate for the Democrats. I think he's going to narrowly win by 2 or 3%. New Hampshire really comes down to Sununu runs. If he does run for Senate, it's I think till Democrat. If he does not run, or I think actually lean Democrat. If he just runs for governor again, it's safe Republican. In Maine, Janet Mills running against Paula Page. I think Paula Page is an okay candidate, but Janet Mills still probably not going to lose this race. So I think a 5-point Democratic win there could be pretty close though. And if there's a big enough red wave, we could absolutely see Paula Page winning this race. So, and a lot can go wrong for Democrats. They can lose Nevada, they can lose Michigan, they can lose Georgia, they can lose Virginia, they can lose Pennsylvania, they can lose Maine, they can lose New Hampshire, they can if there's a red wave, they can be down to only really a third of governors each, which would be obviously a disaster for them. And they obviously do not want that to happen. So they're gonna, especially governors, because they're governing and instead of legislating. They need to clean up their act, and if they don't do that, their voters are not going to be kind to them in November 2022. Now in the House, it really comes down to redistricting. I don't want to talk about it too much, but I think Democrats could lose some suburban seats if COVID continues. I think they could, unless they have a really harsh gerrymander, which they could do. But I think that they could lose potentially a seat in Nevada. They could potentially lose a seat in Colorado if this continues. They could potentially, lose a competitive seat in New Mexico if they make Yvette Harrell's seat a little more Democratic. So there's room for Democrats to fall, and I think that right now they're 222 seats. I think right now they're favored to have about 205 to 210 seats in the House, which originally I would have said 215, but not looking good for them right now. Now, taking a look at Joe Biden's approval rating, the most recent poll had disapprove +4, although that is from Rasmussen, which is a poll that, in 2018 they predicted the Republicans would win the generic ballot by 1%. They lost it by 8, so poll that overestimates Republicans, but still concerning for Joe Biden nevertheless. And actually talking about generic ballot polling, the most recent poll, the Democrats up by 3, which is, it's kind of what I'd expect to happen. I think the Democrats can win the generic ballot by a point or two, but 3% is not what they're looking for in the polls, because as we know, polls overestimate Democrats, and they're expected to win the generic ballot by like 6 or 7 in 2020, and they lost it, and they won it by I think 2 or 3, and then Joe Biden won the popular vote by 4.5. So Democrats, I think, for them to feel good about their polling, they need to be up by 5 nationwide, because remember, this is a nationwide poll, and Democrats, they do very well nationwide, but they lose a lot of competitive races in the Midwest or in the South because they just cannot appeal to certain voters. And, they're great at appealing to urban voters in California, New York, and Illinois, which wins them the popular vote, but it doesn't matter because we're talking about local races like the House or in the Senate. And we obviously do not elect presidents by popular vote. And the Democrats, like if they lost the popular vote, they'd be doomed. Because, Joe Biden won the popular vote by 4.4%, and he only won a handful of states by under a point. Like if we saw a 1-point swing to Trump in the popular vote nationwide, he would have won the election. So Democrats have no margin for error, and they have to win the popular vote by at least 4. At least 4. And, the House Democrats won the popular vote by, I think, 3%, and they lost like 13 seats. So Democrats have to win the popular vote. Absolutely, they cannot afford to lose that. And the only poll that's had them down in the generic ballot was McLaughlin Associates, which had them down by a point. Generic ballot, I don't think that's going to happen. It could happen, but I don't think it's realistic right now, even though the Democrats are kind of at a low point. But I guess you could say it's worth mentioning. Excuse me. Now, according to 538, Joe Biden has a 51.5% approval rating. This is his lowest point ever. When he came into office, I think he had like a 50. This is the honeymoon period because people really didn't have anything to judge him for. But he had a plus 17% approval rating. His high point was in mid-April, I think, right here where he had a bump where he was like plus 14 in 538. He was actually plus 17 in RCP at one point in April. And now he's down to 52% approval rating, 51.5% approval rating, and 43% disapproval rating, which is not great. But if we talk about polls of likely registered voters, it narrows up a little more. Polls of adults, I think it narrows up, but it kind of decreases anyways. So these are polls that overestimate Democrats. Trump's approval was like 43% for most of his presidency, and he got 47% of the vote. And Joe Biden's approval rating throughout the election was like 54%, and he got 51% of the vote. So these polls overestimate Democrats, as all polls do. Now, RCP, I know, this is a right-leaning site. I certainly understand that, and I know people have called it out, but they were more accurate than 538, and right now Joe Biden, they have him above water by 6%, which is, better than Trump ever was, but still his worst point ever. And like I said, he had a surge in April when the vaccines were kind of rolling out a lot. He had a honeymoon period in January and February, but right now he's at his lowest point ever, and I think that's tied to COVID because A, Americans are sick of giving the government the benefit of the doubt with COVID, and second, or B, I said A and second, B, the Democratic Party, and I said this a lot in this video, they had one job, and right now they're failing to complete that job. So that is I think what's hurting Joe Biden right now, and that's why I think the Republicans are favored to pick up the Senate, favored to win more governor seats, and favored to pick up the House. So not exactly a red wave, but I guess a red ripple, if you will. But that's it for this video, guys. I don't want this to go on too long. This is 25 minutes long. I want to cap it off here. But if you take one thing away from this video, let it be this. Right now, the Democratic Party, I'll say it again, they had one job, and they are failing to complete that job. And if this continues, like I said, if the election were to be held today, I think this is what I think could happen. Could they fix it? Could things be completed for 2022? Absolutely. The Democrats could be in a much better position in a year and a half from now, and I guess in 15 months from now, which is when the election will be held. But as of right now, I do not see that happening, and I think the Democrats need to really clean up their act. So that's it for this video. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll see you all in the next video. Goodbye.